Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we are talking about the top 5 tank mates for African cichlids. We get this question all the time and we're excited to just walk through a quick list. Can't wait to get to the video, so let's dive right in. Hey guys, my name is Troy.
I'm Alec.
And we're going to talk about our top 5 tank mates for African cichlids. And it's important to know within this video we are specifically talking about Lake Malawi African cichlids, which consist of haps, peacocks, and mbuna. Haps can sometimes be considered predatory or common haps, but peacocks are kind of in the middle in terms of aggression and size. And then you have mbuna, which are still get a decent size, but they can be pretty aggressive. All of these have some nuances when you're keeping them. Obviously with haps, like Alec's tank here, you want something that's pretty big. But with peacocks, you can maybe get something slightly smaller, and mbuna, maybe even a little smaller. You also sometimes need to overstock your tank when keeping these fish so that you're mitigating aggression as best as you can.
Now, I must say I am kind of an African cichlid purist. I like to keep African cichlids with just African cichlids. That's just my preference. But African cichlids can actually go with some other fish if that is your preference.
It just sometimes isn't ideal, right? Like sometimes you just really want some other fish in the tank for some reason. You only have mbuna and you're just like, what else could I get in there to add some variety? And that can run into some issues for whatever reason. But this list, I think, is probably your best options if you really need to do it.
In this list, we go over a few main things you need to consider when adding non-African cichlids to an African cichlid tank.
And we'll try to do our best when we're talking about this to specify if it's more of like a haplochromis, peacock, or a mbuna tank. But obviously, like we said, it's Lake Malawi, not really about Tanganyikans or other West African cichlids. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the list. Okay, so coming in at number 5 on the list are just other cichlids. And this is going to be a pretty broad category that we're going to talk about, but we're going to go through some pretty quickly here and then we'll get into the rest of the list. Starting off with just the ideal setup would be keeping haps with more haps, peacocks with peacocks, and mbuna with mbuna, or just a mix of those three. If you're really looking to add a variety, you could do something like your West African cichlids, maybe your jewel cichlids, which can be kind of feisty, but sometimes hold their own. You could do something like the Polenti cichlid, which is from Madagascar, has similar water parameters, gets pretty big and can hold its own. Or you could do some of your like Tanganyikan cichlids, like your Tropheus, which could probably go with mbuna, right?
Yeah, I've done it before.
And then you could also do something like your Frontosa, which gets pretty big and can kind of hold its own too. But again, none of those are ideal. There are some differences in diet to keep in mind if you're ever doing that. If you're keeping those with mbuna that need a heavy veggie diet, and some of the other fish like your Frontosa need a protein-based diet, that's just really difficult to control in your tank. And since we're already talking about different cichlids, we might as well talk about some Central and South Americans as well. There are definitely some of these Central and South American cichlids that can work with Lake Malawi cichlids. It's been done many times and will continue to be. It's just not totally ideal. Some of them I've seen work really well, or at times, are the blood parrots, the Severums, Jack Dempsey's, electric fluicaras, you know, some of those
Convicts.
Yeah, anything that's kind of like small to mid-sized cichlids that aren't overly aggressive, like something like a doe-eye. Just as an example, they could sometimes work together and they can coexist, but it's just really tricky and it doesn't always work. And that's why sometimes African cichlids get a bad rap of aggression, but sometimes they're just put in a situation with the wrong types of cichlids.
I think that is a good place to add in the things to consider, because as long as you are putting in the fish with similar size, similar behavior, like are they fast swimmers? You know, if you put an angelfish in, they might be a little bit too slow and flowing fins that the African cichlids can't help but be aggressive and nip at you. Maybe Severum's too slow. But if you're a big fish that can, you know, have a little speed, can get away, and you have similar behavior, like a blood parrot, like a convict that can defend itself, you'll be fine.
Most of the time. And again, it's not always ideal, so you just kind of have to pick and choose and do your best, but know that you're kind of getting into a risky situation if you're trying to hold that mix. but a lot of what you just said kind of flows into number 4 on the list, which are sharks. But not actual sharks. They are the red-tailed shark and the bala shark, and both could be in a tank with some Lake Malawi cichlids for different reasons. The red-tailed shark, I think, is a little feisty. It can get a pretty good size, and it swims pretty actively kind of in the bottom third of the tank, and so I think it could really go well with mbuna, sometimes some peacocks. And even though it's not a totally ideal match, like the red-tailed shark is not from Lake Malawi, but it can be adaptable to their water parameters, I think it is a good match. And when it comes to the bala shark, that's one that gets even bigger, and it is a very active swimmer. It goes back and forth. This fish works really well with South American cichlids like I have with my Oscar, but I think it can work with different Lake Malawi cichlids, and it might even work with these guys.
Oh yeah, and the bala shark is very adaptable. It's very large, and it can fit. It loves open water swimming space, but also goes well with a tank that needs a little bit more decor, like your 180, where you have a bala shark with some more decor. My predator haps wouldn't probably like that much decor, but your bala shark could easily be transferred into here, and he would fit right in. He'd love swimming around with these guys.
And I think it would work if that bala shark was already a pretty good size, because if you put a standard local fish store bala shark in with these guys, it would be a snack. But mine that has grown out for about 4 or 5 years, that is now a pretty good size, it could go easily with these guys, and I think it would work really well. But you just kind of have to feel that out the best you can. And like we said, these are not ideal situations. It's just if you have to have something different, these could be options. So then coming in number 3 on the list are Plecos. And Plecos are a really good tank mate for a variety of cichlids. They are mostly from South America, but they're very adaptable, so they can go in the same tank parameters as African cichlids in most scenarios. I've never seen an issue with that. They're basically just armored catfish, so they do really well. They stay out of the way of your Lake Malawi cichlids. Sometimes your haps or your peacocks could nip at them a little bit, try to go after their eyes, but if you have a little bit of cover at the bottom, typically they'll be really good tank mates.
Yeah, plecos are just something that can add a nice little different design or look to your African cichlid tank when everything else is, the same type of species, and it also does a good job cleaning algae out of your tank.
And you're going to start to see some of this in the next two, like the bottom dweller type. Number 2 on the list is one that I fought for number 1, but number 2 on the list is a clown loach. And some people will say, no, you can't do the clown loach because they're from Asia. They get huge if you've had them for like 8 to 10 years, which is true, but they still do really well in all tank parameters, in my opinion. They're very adaptable. They're very tough fish. They love to be in a school, so if you get a school of like 7 or more, they're just very fun to watch, and it can be very unique dynamic. And they'll stay at the bottom. They'll kind of hide in nooks and crannies on the bottom of your tank or even in your background. They're just they stay out of the way of your Lake Malawi cichlids.
Yeah, and if you have an African cichlid tank, you don't want to add something that's going to be aggressive toward your African cichlids. And clown loaches are definitely not aggressive. And going back to plecos and clown loaches, they are both hardy fish like cichlids are, which is one of the perks of them, which also makes them, able to coexist.
And the one thing we didn't mention is their color pattern is really cool. Obviously they have the orange and black stripes, very unique. It's a color pattern you won't see with African cichlids, so if you're looking for something that could maybe occupy the bottom of your tank and just provide a little different behavior than the African cichlids that are swimming back and forth, clown loaches are the best choice. And that leads us at number 1 on the list, which are different types of Synodontist catfish. I currently have Synodontist petricola with my peacocks and haps. I absolutely love them. I've had them for about 5 years now, and they've thrived. It's really cool to maybe have like 5 to 6 of them just kind of going in and out of your rock work while you have the peacocks and haps above them swimming back and forth. You can also get different types of Synodontists that are either smaller or bigger. Maybe the petricola work well with mbuna and peacocks, whereas some of the bigger species work well with your haps.
Right.
And there's also a difference in the lakes that they come from.
True, they are not from Lake Malawi, but what I like about the Synodontist petricola that you have in your tank, you have some rock structures that your haps and peacocks don't necessarily interact with, that kind of gives them a home. And they like to kind of keep to themselves. They like to kind of hide out anyway. So it's just a perfect match.
Yeah, and like you said, with bottom dwellers like your Plecos, clown loaches, or Synodontist, you want to have something for them to get under if they need to just protect themselves from the Lake Malawi cichlids. But with Lake Malawi peacocks and haps, you want as much open water swimming space as possible. So you just want to have that balance where you're not putting too much decor, but you're putting enough that they have cover. And when it comes to Mbuna, I think it's just as much rock work as you can get in the tank, the better. And some of these bottom dwellers will also enjoy that space and kind of carve out their own niches in the aquarium.
Absolutely. All right, so that is our top 5 list. A couple of honorable mentions that barely missed the cut were the Siamese algae eaters and rainbow fish, which we think would work in an African cichlid tank as well.
Yeah, the algae eater does what it says, could definitely help with algae. The rainbow fish could provide some activity, color, and maybe even some dither behavior, but we've seen that work with varying levels of success, so we left them off the list. But that does it for our top 5 list of tank mates to keep with African cichlids. If you've had any success keeping other tank mates with African cichlids, or if you just have any general questions, leave that down in the comment section below. We'd be happy to get back to you. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.